Welcome to the WSUV Library video on secondary sources for Roots of Contemporary Issues 105 and 305. My name is Sam Beekler, and I'm one of the faculty librarians on campus. If you're looking for specific information from this video, you can use the timestamps on the right to get to information quickly. As you can see, we'll be going over what a secondary source is, where and how to find the secondary sources you'll be searching for, and where you'll use them in your assignment. But before we begin with that, I wanted to remind you all that if at any point you have questions or need help with finding materials, creating citations, or structuring your research questions, you can reach out to a librarian in a number of ways. This is a screenshot of the library homepage, and on the right you can see the multitude of ways you can contact us. Using the orange Chat with a Librarian button, you'll be able to have a synchronous text-based discussion with a librarian. Using the blue Connect with Zoom button will bring you to a synchronous audio-visual meeting with a librarian where we can share our screen and walk through various databases and more with you. Using the Book a Librarian function, you can schedule a 30-minute appointment with a librarian to discuss your project more in depth. And finally, you can always email, call, or visit us in the building. Just make sure to check our hours first. Now, the question we're all here for. What is a secondary source? A secondary source is, in its most basic definition, a cited resource that was produced sometime after an event took place. Secondary sources provide information that has been analyzed or interpreted. Compared to primary sources, they are not the work of someone who has firsthand experience or participation in events or conditions. Instead, secondary sources use primary sources to create said analysis or interpretation. A classic example of this is the Diary of Anne Frank would be a primary source, and any biography on Anne Frank herself would be a secondary one. Secondary sources can come in many different forms. Generally, they can be textbooks, biographies, or criticisms of literature, artworks, or music. But for this class, you'll be looking specifically at historical monographs and journal articles. We'll cover each of these more in depth momentarily. What we need to know for now is that the common factor of all of these types of sources is that they are comprised of information that analyzes or interprets events and creations that have already occurred. Let's look more closely at historical monographs. Historical monographs are book-length considerations of a single topic, region, era, etc. that is written by a historian. It is, again, an interpretation or analysis of events that have already occurred. A historical monograph is not, however, a collection of articles on a topic, a textbook, or something similar like an encyclopedia. For this type of secondary source, you'll use the library's catalog called Search It. If you want to know more about historical monographs and finding them, there are several links in the video description that include more video tutorials as well as direct examples of historical monographs. Now let's talk about historical scholarly journal articles. These are articles that come from a peer-reviewed, historically focused journal. More specifically, these are articles that a historian or other expert has written, and it has been read by multiple people in the same field before its publication. Scholarly peer-reviewed articles are present in many disciplines, but for the purpose of your LRAs, you'll want to focus on finding articles that are an analysis or interpretation on the history of a topic, region, era, etc. Historical scholarly journal articles are accessed through the library databases. For this class, you'll want to use JSTOR and Project MUSE. If you want to know more about these databases and using them, there are several links to more video tutorials in the video description. Finally, when will you need to use these secondary sources? Throughout the semester, the two places that these will come most into play are in LRA 2, where you will find 2 historical monographs and 2 journal articles, and LRA 4, where you will use your secondary sources to write your research paper and cite the resources accordingly. And that concludes the video on secondary sources for Roots of Contemporary Issues 105 and 305. Don't forget to check out the links in the video description and to always reach out if you have any questions or get stuck in your research process. We're here to help.